Thank you for joining the RTC Executive Advisory Committee meeting. Chairwoman Rosenberg, staff is ready for you to begin the meeting.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Sandra Rosenberg for the record. I'd like to call to order the September 24th, 2020 meeting of the Executive Advisory Committee. RTC staff will begin with a roll call of committee members, introduce staff on the line, and also touch on a few housekeeping items. Mr. Gloria.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. David Gloria, Management Analyst for the RTC for the record. I'll be calling your name in alphabetical order. Please confirm your attendance as I read your name. Travis Anderson.
Yes, present.
Mario Bermudez.
Present.
Dennis Cederberg.
I'm here.
Dale Daffern.
Present.
Thomas Davey.
Here.
Mike Jansen. Mike, you were just unmuted. I just wanted to confirm that you're on the line.
Present.
Thank you. Keegan Luttrell.
Present.
Michael Mays.
Here.
Joanna Murphy.
Present.
Chair Sandra Rosenberg.
Here.
Richard Sechrist.
Present.
Robert Summerfield.
Here.
And Michael Tassi.
I'm here.
All right, thank you, everyone. Please note that we have several RTC staff on the line for today's meeting. This includes Mr. David Swallow, Deputy CEO, Mr. John Penuelas, Senior Director of Engineering, Mr. Craig Rayborn, Director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Mr. David Clyde, Associate General Counsel, Mr. Joe Damiani, Manager of Engineering, Mr. Andrew Kelman, Manager of Transportation Planning, and finally, Ms. Maren Dubois, Management Analyst, who will be reading public comments. As the Chairwoman mentioned, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. When Chairwoman Rosenberg asks for comments from the committee or calls for a vote, please remember to unmute yourself before speaking. Remember to state your name for the record before providing comment. Be sure to mute your line if you are not speaking. Voting will be done verbally. The chair will call for ayes and nays. If there are no nays, then the motion will carry. If there are nays, then a roll call vote will be required. In the event of a roll call vote, please wait for your name to be read to provide your vote. The chair will call for any comments or questions after an item has been presented. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Gloria. Mr. Penuelas, for the first item, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Rosenberg, and members of the committee. John Penuelas, Senior Director of Engineering for the RTC for the record. The first item on the agenda is to conduct the first citizens participation period. But first, I'd like to remind you that on March 22nd, 2020, the State of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspended the requirement to have a physical location for public meetings. Pursuant to Directive 006 and for the health and safety of the community, this meeting is being held telephonically. To allow for public participation, the RTC is accepting public comments via email at publiccomments@rtcsnb.com. Comments can be submitted to be read aloud or to be added directly to the written record. Ms. Maren Dubois will read the public comments received by the RTC.
Thank you, Chairwoman Rosenberg, for the record. This is the first time set aside for public comment. This time is limited to comments on items included on the agenda. Comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Maren Dubois, Management Analyst for the record. There are no public comments at this time. Chairwoman Rosenberg, that concludes the public comments received.
Thank you. Moving on, Mr. Penuelas.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Item 2 is to approve the agenda. The agenda is in order and ready for your approval.
Are there any comments or questions from the committee on the agenda? If there are none, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Dale Daffern, motion to approve.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Penuelas.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. John Penuelas again for the record. The next item is to approve the consent agenda. This consists of items 3 through 25 and can be taken in one motion.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? If there are no questions is there a question? If there are none, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Travis Anderson, City of Mesquite, move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Penuelas.
Yes, moving on to item 26. Again, John Penuelas for the record. And that is to approve revisions to the RTC policies and procedures. This is your yearly item to put forward revisions to the policies and procedures. We've put that out, and we have received none from the agencies. Also, the RTC staff has reviewed the policies and procedures, and we have no revision requests for this cycle. So there are no required actions at this time on this item.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Okay, if there are no, I wouldn't expect so since you didn't have any changes, but if there are no questions or comments, we'll move on to the next item. Mr. Rayborn.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Craig Rayborn, Director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, for the record. The next item will be presented by Mr. Andrew Kelman.
Thank you, Craig. Andrew Kelman, Manager of Transportation Planning, for the record. This item is to receive an update on development of the new Regional Transportation Plan for the years 2021 to 2050. And this plan will be named Access 2050. As a reminder, the current Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP, was adopted in 2017, and federal regulations require it to be updated every 4 years. The RTP must have a planning horizon of at least 20 years, and the first 5 years of this update will serve as the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. Outer years of this plan will be divided into 5-year buckets for planning purposes. So one of the first significant steps of this RTP update was releasing a call for projects earlier this year on May 25th. This asked interested entities to submit projects that are requesting federal funding from any one of the 4 sources planned and programmed by the RTC MPO. And these 4 sources are Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, Transportation Alternatives Program, and the new Highway Infrastructure Program. Additionally, the RTC asked for any projects that meet the definition of being a regionally significant project, or also any projects that may need any federal action or approval, regardless of the project's funding source. Were encouraged to submit their projects during this call for projects. And approximately $2.8 billion is forecast to be available through the year 2050 from the federal funding programs prioritized by the RTC. The call for projects ended on June 10th, and in total 109 projects were submitted. 69 of those projects requested federal funds totaling almost $2 billion. And although the $2 billion requested is less than the approximately $2.8 billion forecast to be available, the challenge of these requests was the timing. Since most of the funds requested were during the TIP years and the early part of the program, the sum of those requests in the early years exceeded the amount available by over $100 million in some years. And so here's a look at the fiscal constraint of the cumulative project requests as originally submitted to the RTC. The top row below the years is the federal apportionments of those 4 federal funding programs anticipated to be available over the life of the program. The middle row is the sum of the local entity project requests, And this sum also includes funds programmed for existing projects in the Transportation Improvement Program. Those existing projects will remain funded. The bottom row is then the difference between total apportionments and the total of the project requests. And as you can see, the program was projected to run a negative balance in the early years of the program all the way to year 2030. Since the RTP must be fiscally constrained and run a positive balance throughout the planning period, not all of the original project requests could be fulfilled. So to achieve fiscal constraint, the MPO's approach leveraged the fact that all project requests could be funded, just not all of them could be funded in the first 10 years of the program. So the RTC requested entities with multiple project requests to prioritize them. This ranking was then used as a basis to delay some lower priority projects and keep higher priority projects in their originally requested years as best possible. We also utilized funding flexibility if a project was eligible for multiple programs. This was aided by the fact that during the call for projects, we didn't require project sponsors to identify specific funding sources for a project. Funding sources were switched if fiscal constraint had already been reached for one source, and that project was eligible for a different funding program. So at the end of this exercise and one-on-one meetings with local agencies in August, fiscal constraint was achieved for each of the individual funding programs and for the overall RTP through the year 2050. And here is a chart that compares the fiscal constraint between the original requests received. Those are in red, and it shows a negative balance in the early years of the program. And then in black is the fiscal constraint after the prioritization exercise and adjusting funding programs for specific projects. And as you can see, the proposed program maintains a positive balance throughout the planning period. So finally, next steps for RTP adoption include assembling a combined RTP project list. That list will include projects identified for funding through the call for projects, regionally significant projects that are locally funded through the Capital Improvement Program, NDOT projects, and projects currently funded and included in the Transportation Improvement Program. And a draft of this comprehensive project list is included in the agenda backup. And one key thing to look out for in the next week or so from RTC staff is an upcoming ESTIP action to add any projects with funds identified in the TIP years. So those new projects with funds in the TIP years will need to be entered into ESTIP before actual adoption of the RTP. And so we will reach out to project sponsors when those projects should be entered. After travel demand modeling and an air quality analysis is completed, a 30-day public comment period will begin in late October. That outreach will include an online review of all projects included in the RTP. After that, EAC consideration to approve Access 2050 is scheduled for December, and then going to the RTC board in January for final adoption. And that concludes my presentation. This item is simply informational.
Thank you, Andrew. I actually do have one comment. I was looking at our list, and I think some of the years may have gotten moved. I don't know if that was on our end or your end, but I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that Tropicana is going out in fiscal year 2021. And I-15 North Package 3 is anticipated for 2022. Those were both listed in 2025. But that being said, we'll comb through the list one more time and make sure there's no other discrepancies that we are aware of compared with our internal list. So thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee?
Madam Chair, this is Craig Rayburn for the record. If I could just respond to yours. The one thing I'll note is the backup material is still a work in progress. I mean, I wouldn't say work in progress, but it's still draft. And so if you note things in there. And for all of the members of the committee that we've met with to run through their projects, the spreadsheet that we showed back in August is the one that translates directly into what we'll end up putting into the STIP. But if you see discrepancies from the list that is in the backup, please let us know, because we do want to make sure that we get everything right.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I've sent a message to my team to go through this this list and let you and Andrew know if there's any discrepancies. Okay, any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, if there are no questions or comments, we'll move on to the next item. Mr. Penuelos.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. John Penuelos for the record. The last item on the agenda is your final citizens participation period.
This is the second time set aside for public comment. Just as a reminder that comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mayor Dubois for the record. There are no public comments at this time. This concludes the public comments received.
Thank you. If there are no additional comments, I will close the item. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.